So we've got some questions for you. We'll start with Nick. Nick, a question's come in to ask, are children who live in the countryside healthier? And what can we do to help children who live in cities to enjoy nature?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm afraid I can't comment on whether children who live in the countryside are healthier. They certainly have much better ability to access the world around them and nature around them. Having said that, I did note Mike's point about growing up in London, and I also grew up in London. I think London as a city, and this is just from my experience, there are many other cities across the country, obviously, it is really fortunate to have a huge wealth of green spaces, and campaigns right now are really trying to boost the amount of green space available to kids. So campaigns like the London National Park City, for example, which other cities are copying across the country and indeed across the world. So there are lots of opportunities in cities. And I think the key thing, and what's particularly been shown during the coronavirus crisis, is we do need to make those spaces accessible to the young people. And I'm really pleased that the government seems to have noted that recently. So just last weekend, Robert Jenrick, the Housing and Communities Secretary, made it absolutely clear to councils that they have to keep their parks open during the coronavirus lockdown. In his words, people need parks. And I think that's absolutely right.
Thank you so much, Nick. Can I come to Mike with the question next? Okay, Mike. Can you hear me, Mike? Brilliant.
Yes.
Fantastic. The question for you, Mike, is will taking action make our lives better or safer, or will it only make a difference to future generations? So will taking action make our lives better or safer, or will it only make a difference to future generations?
Well, I think I'd like to answer that with a very short story in terms of the current virus epidemic and ways that has made us safer. I'm trying to decide which of the two. The London bus drivers had tried to get protection for themselves from their enormous risk of infection with the virus from, first of all, the government, and then from the Transport for London, who are the employer of the bus drivers and the tube workers, and then from the Mayor of London, even through their unions, and they were getting nowhere. And at the latest count, which will be more than that now, because it's a few days ago, 30 Transport for London workers have died in the epidemic because of their exposure to infection. That includes tube workers as well as bus drivers. So the bus drivers got together with a WhatsApp group, and they decided together that they'd had enough and they would seal the front doors of their buses and refuse to take fares because London buses, as you know, only have one door, so it made it impossible for them to take fares and to take fares safely in order to protect themselves. And so now we have free transport in London, free bus transport so far in London. And that's something which has made us safer. It's also, of course, a key strategy for reducing carbon emissions, free public transport across the board.
Thank you so much, Mike. Right, so a question I think that I'll put to Amy, and then I've got a quick question for you all to be thinking about. So I'll just tell you what those questions are so you can be thinking about them. The question is this: how do children or young people learn about the issue of speaking truth to power in a school context if they are always supposed to do what adults say? So how do children and young people learn about the issue of speaking truth to power in all context if they are always supposed to do what adults say? Amy, I'm going to come to you, if I may. You can answer that question, or there's another question that came in, which was, how can I, as an 11-year-old, get people to listen to me?
Well, I think that anyone can get get anyone to listen to you. Your age does not matter at all. So I think start in your own school, in your own community. Speak to your teachers who care and who listen to you, and perhaps start with something like a whole school assembly, and that will really trigger people to listen to what you're saying, and that can really pave the way for you to start a campaign in your own school about something that you're passionate about. And then perhaps you can get in touch with organisations who are already working in your own community about your own campaign, and you can spread that wider in your community and in other schools as well. So I think just keep at it and speak to people that you know who are interested in the environment already, and ask them to share your message and your word as well. And definitely join the Another Way Ambassador programme, because hopefully that will help people to share their message across the country and with their communities.
Thank you, Amy. That's brilliant. Just before we go to our next breakout, a chance for a very brief response, if you can give a brief response to that question of how do we encourage young people to speak truth to power when they're supposed to do as they're told. Anything else you'd like to add, Mike or Nick?
Yeah, thank you. I would just say that it's a very good question, and that I would recommend that students decide what are the things that they would like to see less of in a school, or what they'd like to see more of in a school, and they get together to press for that, either by setting up a school council themselves, if there isn't one already existing there, in order to develop change through their own action.
Great, thank you, Mike. Nick, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I think I mean, I've seen a lot of very inspirational young people, not least on the call today. So it's clear that young people have their own voice and are able to share it. I think the context in which we live means that in many senses, particularly if you've got willing and listening teachers, kids are able to speak up and really say their piece. The clip that I showed earlier, which we didn't unfortunately quite get to finish, but about backyard nature, introduced this group called the Eco Emeralds, which is a group of real live wires from a school in Anfield in Liverpool, who are really big inspiration to the establishment of that particular campaign. And the campaign itself is supported by Iceland supermarkets. And the Eco Emeralds had actually written to the managing director of Iceland, telling him exactly what he should be doing in the stores to tackle the climate crisis. And it was through their inspiration, really, and getting them on board that helped shape that campaign. And it's just one example of a way that young people can speak truth to power and do get heard.
Thank you, Nick. That's brilliant.